Welcome to Law Focus. I'm Edward St. Pé, and let's welcome Nathan Prescott.
Edward Covert Bump.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for being here today on your program.
Well, it's our program, and I totally appreciate you giving me a chance to be on it. And we've worked on this show for, I don't know, over a year now. It's cool.
We've had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, we forged a friendship. I don't know, the viewers at home will probably see something that says, you know, Law Focus number 29, Law Focus number 31, but we've been in it for a while, so it's been fun, and I'm glad to be back.
You know, so many things. Since we started this show, we didn't know about the beginning of the coronavirus or other things.
No.
So many things have occurred.
So many things have occurred. So we've had the beginning of the coronavirus. You know, when we first started the show, we took up some popular current topics, but we also did a lot of, you know, background law and things, and we get back to that every now and then. But what we've done recently is we've been trying to, I've personally been trying, and the producer have been trying to like pull information from the headlines and then talk about that in its relation to law. Because as we'll recall, Law Focus is about the law and you, essentially, you know, how the law integrates into your life and how it affects the headlines and things like that. So we have, you know, there's COVID out there. We could always talk about COVID. We'll talk about COVID again in probably subsequent shows. But right now, there's COVID. Thank you, Clarence. But right now, I'd like to say that the mnemonic trick that's now taught for planets, so we're going to try to get into some space law just briefly because I don't know a ton about it, but it's interesting, is my very eager mother just served us nachos. So Mars, Venus, Earth, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Now it used to be just served us 9 pizzas because it was Neptune and Pluto, but remember, in the 2000s, Pluto got relegated to just an icy orbiter and not a planet. But the reason I mention that is because in the Venusian clouds, they have found phosphine, which is a bioindicator, which seems to suggest there were two women doctors from MIT and Harvard, and they discovered that there was this phosphine signature in these Venusian, the clouds of Venus, which is wildly interesting to me because, you know, they've always thought that life, if it was going to exist in our solar system, was going to exist on Mars, but now here in the clouds of Venus, they found something quite interesting. And if you look back, like Carl Sagan, who people really loved in the 70s and still, you know, he wrote the book Cosmos and he did a long show called The Cosmos. He often thought that there could very well be some kind of life form that had been created in these Venusian clouds. The surface of Venus is very, very hot and intemperate, but these clouds, it turns out, may have what they need for life, including water and temperate climates. So that got me thinking, right? So we've got you know, something happening up in these clouds of Venus, which is not overly far from us in the grand scheme of things. And I started thinking, you know, well, what about space law? Who dictates space law, right? What is it? Well, space law is not unlike a treaty that may be formed between two nations, but because space law involves everything that surrounds the Earth, it's handled by the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. And it's just a series of treaties out there that sort of dictate what happens to, for the preservation of space and the Earth environment, liability for damages that may be caused in space, the settlement of disputes over space. So what we have is we have law that we so often focus on the law in our state or the law in our nation, and I think we've even touched upon, in one instance, Swedish law for ASAP Rocky. Remember when he was in the news for being detained over there in Europe. But now we think about space law and what happens in those contexts. You know, what happens if there is some kind of life there, or what happens if, you know, something busts into the space station? Who has access to space, and is there sort of an ideal that everybody can travel into space that can afford it? And, you know, recently with private space travel becoming more and more inevitable, I would say, it could be very interesting to see what happens there.
You know, many generations ago, 2 or 3 generations ago, the idea of life on, you know, outside the Earth was sort of like, well, you know, it's not. But now today, you know, since we've got a Star Trek generation
Right.
or two
Sure.
behind us.
Oh, this is a good point. Coming
know,
from your TV perspective,
Yeah,
right?
well, coming from, like, let's look back at Star Wars,
Sure.
At that juncture, it was like, it was common, the subsequent generations looked at space travel as, hey, it's just space travel.
Yeah.
Surely there's other life up there. This is not something that's very hard to imagine.
Right.
And I think today, a couple of generations into it, that's how young people look at it. And in fact, I mean, that's how I look at it. I mean, I feel like, we would have to really be, quite smug to think that we're the only intelligent life in the universe,
Sure. Or even not just intelligent life, but just life is what they're looking for now, right? So they think that these phosphine emitters are these things that throw off these biosignatures. Now, one thing that's really interesting is that methane, for instance, can be considered a biosignature. So like when they find methane, they usually find life. But they have been able to create methane with an abiotic process, or a process without like life. So they're worried that potentially this phosphine could be created just by something weird in the Venusian atmosphere and not by life. So they're trying to figure it out. One interesting article I read recently was, so everybody wants to know whether there's life out there on Venus, because they're not looking for intelligent life, they're looking for even single-cell organism life. Nothing like that has been found, right? So everybody's looking for it. The nations are looking for it. Of course, there would be a lot of national pride in being able to discover that if it's out there. But governments move pretty slowly, and in order for a government to go out there and run the full gamut of tests, it could take 5 to 10 years to get a space shuttle out there, to drop the probes in Venus and things like that. But there's smaller companies that can send rockets up in the matter of 6 or 7 months. Now, when they're up there, it's my understanding is when they're up there and they shoot something down that takes samples on its way down to the hot surface of Venus, those samples won't be as in depth as the samples that would have been received from, say, a NASA spaceship or a Chinese manned spaceship, or not manned, but unmanned, unpersoned spaceship. But that information that they received would be vital and could confirm some pretty interesting things. So we may be seeing this happen pretty quickly, and that's just the private sector at work. So governments generally have the resource and have the funding and have the scientific backing to support these kinds of endeavors. But now, as rocket engineering is becoming more and more prevalent and more accessible to, of course, not individuals, but to bigger companies and companies that want to do it, and motivated companies, we may be able to see some quicker turnaround in determining what actually is happening in Venus. But the scientist goes to the credit, a lot of credit goes to these scientists from, I want to name them, it was Dr. Silver and Dr. Seeger from MIT and Harvard, respectively. So huge credit to them. I mean, there was this, I think Seeger was studying phosphine and finding out that it was a biosignature. And then, from what I understand, Dr. Silver believed that Venus could harbor something like that. And sure enough, through processes that are way above my pay grade, they discovered this phosphine and then have opened up a new realm of thought for a lot of individuals. And, for lawyers that are interested in, I don't know, monetizing it, profiting from it, figuring it out just for the benefit of mankind. There's a lot of interesting legal aspects that come up within it, although it stretches my imagination to figure them out right now because it's difficult and new. Unlike, not unlike COVID, which is difficult and new for us to deal with, right? So we talk about how many shows we've done and how we forged our friendships through this and how we've come to know each other and we've learned together. And sometimes I'll strike an idea in the newspaper and magazines and I'll say, that would be really good for the show. But I not only think about it as good for the show and the viewers, but I also want to impart, I like to have the joy of our conversation, and I like it when you like what we've got going, and, I enjoy your questions too.
Here's an interesting thing. Through the years, I've dabbled with film stuff, and so
Sure.
we did a film. It was a submarine film, and we shot it on the USS Drum in, I think, 2010.
Okay, where was it? You had some involvement in it.
Yeah, I wrote it.
Yeah, you wrote it.
I
cool.
I directed it. I wrote it.
Sure.
It was a short film festival film. So it was about maybe 30 minutes.
Sure.
Anyway, long story, but I did a lot of research on it before I wrote it as I was writing it. And it was a submarine. It was a U-boat film, is what it was. Historically, at the end of the war, as submarines surrendered to Allied troops at the end of the war, one of the submarines was the U-boats was en route to Tokyo with a load of uranium.
Okay.
To work with the Japanese to create a dirty bomb, which they were going to use. The Japanese had the largest submarine of anyone in the war. They were going to take that Japanese submarine off the coast of the U.S., take a plane up from the bow, from below, fill it with uranium oxide, and drop it on San Francisco.
Wow.
Okay, so when the war ended and Admiral Donitz got on the horn and said, "U-boat men surrender to the Allies," this particular ship, they were going to have to surrender to the Russians, but they didn't. They did a 180 and they sought out the United States to surrender to the U.S.
Really?
We got the uranium. We towed it in, a little kind of unknown fact here. We towed that ship in, that U-boat in to Boston Harbor.
Really?
There is video, you can find it, of the disembarking of the U-boat men and some of the leaders on the boat. Black and white
Japanese?
footage. Germans.
Germans, okay.
All U-boat guys.
A U-boat.
Right. They came off, okay. And then we went on board and said, oh my God, what is this? Drums and drums and drums of uranium oxide, radioactive fuel. Okay. Now, the conjecture is, at that point, there wasn't enough uranium in our arsenal to create the Hiroshima bomb and the Nagasaki bomb. And there's, through the Freedom of Information Act, there's information that shows they were saying, how can we get enough? We're not going to be able to get it for another year or two.
Right.
Suddenly, bam, we had enough uranium and we dropped the bomb.
Really?
The conjecture is we use that uranium to finish the bombs and drop them on and end the war.
Wow.
Okay, so what the point is that I'm trying to make is there were a lot of things going on in the Wunderwaffe program, let's say the super weapons program, like the uranium oxide, other things. That they were working on that we got. There's a book out called Operation Paperclip. And the Paperclip, have you heard of it?
No.
All right, Paperclip program was like a secret program. CIA ran it. Said, okay, all of the German scientists from the rocket program, the V2 rockets, if Eisenhower had said, if they are ideologues and they're at all involved with the Nazi Party, we are not taking them into America. But if they're just scientists, then we can take them into the American rocket program.
Okay.
Okay. All of them were ideologues. They were all they were all SS men, Waffen SS men. So, but the way they took them in was, it was a program. So they put a paper clip on. If they used the paper clip, in other words, it was just like a secret thing. This guy, he's okay, put him in. Oh, the paper clip, okay. And so we got 1,000 scientists. All of our NASA program in the beginning there was Wernher von Braun, the father of NASA.
Really?
Put our first man on the moon. That was all V2 rocket science that went into getting any man on the moon. The Apollo program, all of that was Wernher von Braun. He was the head of the V2 rocket program.
He was a German.
He was the head of this V2 rocket program.
Wow.
He was the head of NASA. Anyway, he's dead now, and he's buried. I believe he's buried. I think they sent him back to Germany when he died. But he was in Birmingham. He was in Alabama at the rocket.
Huntsville.
Huntsville, yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway, okay, I digress. The reason why I'm telling you all the history here is that here's something interesting, and if you look it up, you'll find some interesting information. According to undocumented facts, when the war was over, we found, and the Russians too, all of the trove of these secret weapons programs that they were, the first jet fighter, also the V2 rocket that they used, first ballistic missile, right? V2 rocket. They found something called they call it the Bell program. And what the Bell was a new invention. It was an anti-gravity type device that they had worked on and perfected, where the propulsion, it flew, but in unconventional means. It's just like zoom, zoom, like what we now think of as a flying saucer.
Wow.
So the conjecture is, if you look into the ending of the war, as the American pilots were flying in over Germany, they encountered something called the Foo Fighters. That's where that band name comes. The Foo Fighters, F-O-O Fighters. The Foo Fighters. The Foo Fighters were, they would be coming in with the planes, and all of a sudden they'd see these flights, and it was an unconventional flight. They didn't know what they called them, the Foo Fighters.
Wow, I didn't know that.
The conjecture was that was the Bell technology being used in a vehicle that no one had ever seen before, and that's where the beginning of seeing these things around the world. That's when, of course, it had been going on before that, but that's when it got. That's when it really
people saw
popped up, and the conjecture is that was the German fighters in the Foo Fighters, using the Bell technology propulsion machines, which were basically UFOs, right?
Yeah.
No one could figure out what it was, and that's what we have been seeing flying around all these years.
What?
And they are gone, but they're not really gone. They're still somehow, some way, and of course, we as the victors in the war got that technology. And what we did with it, of course, is top secret.
We don't know where it is.
We don't know where it is, but that's kind of what the Area 51 is all about. If they don't know what's going on in Area 51, right?
Right.
Some of that might be what's
Foo Fighters.
Whatever the Foo Fighters were all about, that's in reality that technology is still around,
Wow.
Of course. Anyway, interesting, huh?
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, and it definitely implicates some ideas about the law too. Like what must the government disclose? How can with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yeah.
We deal with the Freedom of Information Act and governmental contracts and things like that all the time. One company may do business with somebody, with a school board or something, and you got a Freedom of Information Act request. Well, I guess that could just be writ large, and you try to find something even larger than that, or these Foo Fighters or what have you.
Foo Fighters, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm sure Freedom of Information Act requests have gone out for there. But in a Freedom of Information Act request, both of the federal and the state government, there's certain things that prohibit you from accessing information that you would otherwise have access to, and one of those being like governmental security issues. So
Can you imagine everything the president knows?
Yeah, right.
What does he know that he, of course, cannot talk about? He must know a lot.
Our president would probably tell us.
He would be one that would. But he can't. He can't. But all presidents must be privy to information that would make your hair stand on your head.
Really?
If you really knew what they knew.
Yeah, definitely.
That's why when they got out of office, they're completely gray. They go in, right? And they're normal when they come out with white hair, right?
Yeah, nobody can ever trump them with or stop them with the Freedom of Information Act.
Okay, I'm being told we need to take a break.
All right, Clarence.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back after this.
Little Market on Belande Street, right off Government Street, downtown Ocean Springs, now offering curbside service, deliveries, and home deliveries. Call 228-300-4545 or go online at iHeartBagel.com. Sliced deli meats and cheeses from Boar's Head. Great freezer meals for easy family dinners. The greatest homemade bagels. 228-300-4545 or iHeartBagel.com. Little Market, Ocean Springs.
Back with more Law Focus, Nathan Prescott.
Hey, Edward, so we talked a little bit about space law, and I was going to segue into some copyright law. How am I going to do that? Well, I just learned at the segue that you know something about this, but in 1972, David Bowie released an album called Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, right?
Right.
So he sort of acted like, it was like a rock opera, correct?
It was, yeah.
It was like a rock opera, and he was thrown to earth, and he had like all these lustful powers, and everybody liked him, and then at the end, I think he died, didn't he?
You could probably say that.
It's iffy.
You could probably say that, I think.
But anyway, I was thinking about that, and I've thought about this so much, and Law Focus actually allows me to answer some questions that I haven't always answered, and one of my questions was, people play cover songs all the time of that album. All the time, or people play cover songs of the Beatles, or people play cover songs of Led Zeppelin, or people play cover songs of pretty much Bruno Mars, any popular artist, whether it be contemporary or from another generation that still sort of stands around immortal. And I was thinking about how are those parties compensated? And it turns out that these performing rights organizations have an interest. You'll know them as soon as I call them: ASCAP, BMI, SCI, and Sound Exchange. So, if you're in the business, you think about it, like all these bands that are out there strumming, old covers of Love Me Do or whatever, maybe infringing upon a copyright. Now, there's some exceptions for that. It's got to be in public. So all the wedding singers in the world, right, are okay, I think. Call me if you're a wedding singer. But if it's not open to the public, they can generally go out there and cover these acts. But if they're profiting from it and it's a public display, I know around here sometimes you see cover bands advertised on the marquees of the Beau Rivage, or
like the Beatles,
the Harrah's, or
I went to the last one.
Right? Yeah. Right. So
at the casino. Yeah.
The Beatles have to be compensated for things like that. That is not such an original work. I mean, you think about it: John, Paul, George, Ringo, whoever wrote the song, put sort of blood, sweat, and tears into it, created this immortal music, and then somebody just copies it. If somebody were allowed to copy it and do it better or worse, and the Beatles got no credit, then it wouldn't encourage people to be inventive and create music. So,
residuals.
Yeah, residuals. But not just residuals from the playing on the air, but residuals from the copying, right? It's very interesting to me in the new context of YouTube and whatever, Instagram, TikTok, whatever people do now. You get online, and if you're learning to play the guitar or the harmonica or whatever, there are so many covers out there. And I see sometimes that YouTube will take them down, because in the YouTube context, I think the way that YouTube encourages people to post videos is because if they get enough people watching the videos and there's commercials, and then the person that created the video gets paid, right? So as soon as that goes from a private, non-profitable endeavor to a profitable endeavor, somebody is entitled to be paid. Right. Now, there are so many songs out there in the world, countless songs, right? Then how do you figure it out? Well, these performing rights organizations, ASCAP, BMI, SCI, and the like, they've just got like these huge song catalogs online. And if you are playing one of those cover songs, there might be a chance that you owe a little money.
Right.
I don't think how do you enforce it? There's so many musicians in the world, but how do you enforce it? Now, I have seen some legal stuff, like you go into an old dive bar or something, and they got a jukebox with 50 CDs in it from their own private collection, and they're playing those CDs. That's a problem, believe it or not, because when you buy a CD like that, you've got a right to listen to it in what they call it, a circle of family and friends, right? But you do not have a right, your copyright, the purchase, the $15 purchase of that album does not afford you the opportunity to play that music publicly. Right. So, bars, restaurants might get into trouble for, playing that old copy of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, right? If everybody's out there enjoying it and ASCAP finds out about it, then, you get a nasty little letter. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Well, television stations and radio stations pay yearly fees based on some formula, right?
Right.
To ASCAP, BMI, CSAC.
You pay, yeah.
You pay, everybody pays, radio, TV, as a right to be able to use any song out there. You play a blanket fee, and then you can play any song that's under ASCAP, BMI.
Which is a lot of songs.
Which is everything, basically, more or less.
Yeah. So let's think. So you've got a show, right? And you say, well, this would be really cool to score with a Beatles song, right?
Right.
You just go pull it, but you hope that ASCAP or somebody has that, and you're pretty confident that it would.
Yeah. The better way to do it is to create or use some material that's not, registered with ASCAP under another artist, then you don't pay anything.
Right.
And there are places to go to
for free music in the public domain.
You might pay a flat fee to get it, but then you can use it forever.
Right.
Instead of that, because it avoids that.
Right.
Depending, if you're creating original content, you might want original music.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. Now, I thought about it also in the context of radio stations. So you got a bunch of radio stations out there, right? And I always thought, like, hey, a radio station, it's like a symbiotic relationship, and that a radio station plays a song, maybe promote album sales or concert attendance, but the radio stations pay ASCAP too.
They do.
Everybody pays.
Everybody pays.
If an artist creates, somebody has to pay to play it.
That's right.
But it's not free. There's no free ride.
Forever. And by the way, I was at the warehouse when David Bowie came with the Ziggy.
You were telling me that's in New Orleans.
The warehouse was a place in New Orleans, and all the bands came there, and we were growing up in the area, so of course that's where we went to see all the concerts.
Yeah.
When Ziggy Stardust and Spiders from Mars tour was going on, I think by the time he came to New Orleans, it might have been '73 because I was in college.
Yeah, right.
So they came to the warehouse with that tour, and we were there. We saw that tour. It was a mind-expanding experience.
It was. You said it was sort of like the start of the rock opera kind of thing, or the rockish show.
Yeah, you know, he had Alice Cooper out there doing theatrical rock at that time.
Right.
But Alice Cooper was kind of almost like farcical in a way.
Right.
You know what I mean? But David Bowie came out, and he had a long history of theatricality in his. You know, he was like a folk artist in London, England, but he evolved, you know, into rock and roll. He and the other guy on the scene at the time was Mark Bolan with T-Rex.
Okay.
Mark Bolan really is the one guy who blew it out.
Oh, really?
With glam rock.
Sure, I didn't know. You know, I've heard the T-Rex. I've heard some T-Rex albums.
T-Rex is great,
and I enjoy the music. But
I saw T-Rex at the warehouse.
But I did not. I've never seen them perform.
I saw
you know,
T-Rex.
whereas David Bowie became like this big figure.
Well, T-Rex was different. I mean, T-Rex was kind of folkish too.
Yeah.
It was two guys in T-Rex.
Oh, really?
When they toured.
Sure.
We were at the warehouse and we were waiting for T-Rex to come out and do, you know, Bang a Gong, right?
Right.
It came out and it was two guys like in dashikis, you know, and Mark Bolan had his long hair and the other guy was on the congos and Mark Bolan crossed his leg on the stage and people were literally booing.
Really?
Because they wanted to hear Bang a Gong, you know. It wasn't what they were expecting. He was like in an ethereal realm, you know.
Yeah.
And he was just playing, you know. But when Bowie came out,
he showed out. He played the album.
They were on it because they knew what they had struck worldwide gold, right? So they came out. Before they came out, I remember, never forget, the house went dark and they started playing the theme from Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then
I wonder if that was infringed. We don't know.
They probably
had to pay
rights to it, I'm sure. And then they walked out. They walked out, you know, like space guys, you know. And that was the beginning. After that,
and you just sat there glued for 2 hours.
Oh no, it was just incredible. It was really incredible. But you know, David Bowie was the greatest. He was just one of the greatest artists, you know.
Yeah.
You know, another thing he did that was very interesting that a lot of other artists have never done.
What?
Before he died, maybe about 10 years before he died, his catalog of songs, he took the catalog of songs, he put them into, I don't think it was an IPO, but it was a stock offering where people could invest in the David Bowie catalog and in perpetuity as an investment.
Wow.
So they did. It was like it was like an IPO. Whatever money it raised, he got, and he gave up the rights, but everybody could benefit throughout in perpetuity.
Wow, that is really
neat.
neat.
He made like $100 million.
Yeah.
He said, "Okay, I'm out. Y'all got the music," and now people who invested,
they hope that
BMI and CSAC rights.
Look at that.
Forever. He was the first one to ever do that. I don't know how many people ever did it after that, but he made news when he did it because no one had ever done it, and he.
It's ingenious.
David Bowie was a genius. I mean, he really was. He was a marketing guy as well as an artist, you know, and a performer too.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up. And you know, I often think about musicians and how they get paid now. I don't know if you subscribe or whatever, but I got Apple Music. It's so convenient now. You know, you can just listen to it all. I hope they're being paid.
It's another game changer that's occurred.
It's nutty.
No more record stores.
No, and remember, I don't know, you probably collected records. I collected CDs. I mean, that was fun. I was proud of my collection.
No more CDs.
You know how you hold on to things like that, you know, and like you create these things that you're proud of, whether it be like a 300 disc changer or whatever.
Yeah, I got one of those in the attic right now.
And then technology just rips away part of you.
It's the truth.
You don't get to see them anymore.
It's now obsolete.
But I still have a bookshelf. I'm not a holy Kindle or reader.
I got a bookshelf where I that's something tangible about a book. You know?
I know something tangible about a CD too.
It is. It's true.
Things change.
Okay. Well, I'm getting
a pleasure as always, guys. I think that, you know, we went through space law and some David Bowie and copyright.
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah.
Next week we'll talk about something like tax deductions or something real.
Something boring.
Something boring. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Law Focus.
Thank you.